what I typically do with this type of work session is just attend the roster, especially the elected officials, and then when Laura shows up, we'll just, get the time down. So, and then if Matt does come or not, you know, there's a, just so that we know who was here and maybe what she may have missed.
Okay.
Try to catch her up, so. The only other thing that you have is, if you'd like to do the Pledge of Allegiance, that's,
Sure.
really the only opening ceremony that I have for this meeting.
Do you want to do a roll call with everybody, or no?
We got the three of you.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So first up is the resolution of 589, which is the current rates, which the three of us got on the diocese.
So, and I do have extra packets, I don't know if you were interested in the whole packet.
Thank you.
Sure. Consultants are interested in what we got here. Anyway, I want to share that. Resolution 589, it has been kind of the policy is to adopt the utility rates the year before and then get those posted out and public so that everybody kind of knows what those rates are going to be. In my experience, in previous locations and here, nobody really knows what the rates are until they get their bill in February. Because keep in mind, we don't bill for January's the new rate structure until they'll see it in February. So a lot of times there's a lot of gap between that time. But the one thing is that we always try to be very sensitive to the front desk person because they think that person has control over those rates. And so we try to make sure that this last year was not quite the increase that we had in previous years. But we always want to make sure that we're sensitive to the fact that, you know, that he shouldn't be out there alone facing it. So we try to give him as much information as possible in advance of that. So just so you know what the rates are now, I know that some of the studies in here actually have those rates. But that is just basically for your information, just to, so everybody kind of knows how we currently, in the last couple of years, have adopted rates.
And Katie, is it also true that there was a rate increase in 2022? Is that also true?
There was a rate change
Okay.
in 2022. So we modified the rates and got rid of the ERT.
Ah, okay.
So, and it was an ERT, and you know, I'm not the expert on that, but it used to be based on sewer usage or sewer discharge rates, but they were also applying it to water and sewer. And the way it was applied, there was no rhyme or reason, there was no standard of how it was applied. So it was changed to basically water used for commercial businesses was how they were charged for sewer, period. Residential, they're now charged for, if you're a multifamily, you're charged for your water usage is charged to your sewer. But single residential is now, you have a water and sewer, and we estimate your average water use during the winter, and then that's how we charge you for the sewer, starting in April, April billing.
Any questions? Current rates? Are you doing the trash pickup?
So I am happy to introduce Joe, I don't know your last name. Joe Laban. And Aaron Hamstra. When I first got here, Aaron wanted to know if he could be included in the contract for trash pickup in town. And it was already too late. They had signed a 5-year agreement, 2019, and that was a couple months before I started with the town. So I told Aaron, I said, well, we'll just kind of hang on. It's 5 years. Our 5 years will be up at the end of this year. Now, in their contract, they have the ending date of December 31st, 2025, but that's 6 years. That's not 5 years. And so I have asked Republic Services to basically, are they gonna contact me? And JC Velasquez, who's been very good about communicating, said that, well, somebody's supposed to be getting with you, and they didn't. So the only thing I put in here was the email that I got from JC about the fact that they would contact us, but they never did. So I still don't have anything from Republic Services about what they would like to do. Now, JC certainly will like to stay with our business, but, I would think that this is something that they would have kind of spent some time with, unless they don't understand the difference between 5 years and 6 years, and the date was just probably an error.
Well, I think it concerns me that you haven't heard from them at all. And JC might be great, but I think it was the Muni manager, right, that was supposed to get back in touch with you?
That's correct.
Yeah. So that's concerning because you would think that, our business would matter to them and that they would prioritize that.
Well, our experience with Republic Services is that when a customer has a problem, they're supposed to call the phone number for Republic Services, and of course, it's almost the same number for GFL and WCA and everything else. And the last time I had a customer problem, the customer said, well, they won't talk to me because they have to talk to Bloomfield Public Works Director. And I'm like, well, but we're Bayfield,
Yeah.
we're not Bloomfield.
Yeah.
So when I called, I got the same response. And then when, Monday morning, of course, this all happens on Friday afternoon. On Monday morning, when I called, they said, oh, well, they weren't given the right information. I'm like, well, this is just last year. I mean, we've been with you for almost 3 years, so what was new that they should have known? I know that actually I had a complaint about Aaron picking up trash, and when I looked up Aaron, because I kind of had that conversation with him early on, I said, well, the man lives in town. He's gonna have a truck in town. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't isolate
Yeah.
this to only Republic Services types of organizations or where you can live, so. And I know that we've been talking with Aaron about this, certainly would like to get, Republic Services, but if they have the opportunity to get something today, so.
Well, do you, by chance, track customer complaints and response times? I mean, you mentioned 1 or maybe 2 just now, but does the town tend to track that to know how good the service is as far as the community is concerned?
So, Kat, this original contract was with WCA.
Okay, yep, I saw
WCA
that.
lasted, what,
Correct.
18 months?
Yeah.
Maybe a year? Then they went to GFL. And when they went to GFL, all their trucks were breaking down. So they missed whole neighborhoods, they missed whole sides of town. And, just simply give us a call or something so that we can plan ahead. Instead, because we close at Friday at noon, people are still trying to get their trash picked up for, the next weekend of activities.
Yeah,
And they're having issues getting a hold of anybody. Then they went to Republic Services. I would have to say that the service has gotten a little bit better until they sent me to Bloomfield.
yeah. Yep, okay,
Trash didn't get picked up today.
okay.
Yeah, I don't think they've been down Mesa
Yeah,
yet.
they haven't been down Mesa yet.
Yep, no, they
It's
haven't
kind
been,
of consistently bad.
yeah, yeah. they
I don't
haven't.
know, if your neighborhood's been good?
No,
Okay,
yeah, it seems like it's consistent throughout town,
okay.
yeah.
Well, they won't be in your neighborhood today.
Oh, because it's
they're a day
tomorrow.
behind because
Yeah,
of the holiday.
Because of the
Oh,
holiday.
mean,
true,
just
true,
so
true,
you know.
true. Yeah.
Yes,
They
thank you.
won't be there
Thank
till
you.
Yeah.
tomorrow.
I've lost track of time.
I know.
So thank you for reminding me of that. Well,
So
let's,
I'll let Aaron.
yeah, yeah,
I'll say some words here. This is the proposal here, I think you
Yes.
guys all have it.
Uh-huh.
Keep it fairly clean and simple. But I'll walk and talk us through it here, and then maybe we can open up for some questions, so think of some hard ones for me. I know this is a rate discussion, so let's talk about rates. We'll get it going first, and then we'll kinda hash out some things along the way, and that number that we're probably most concerned with for the residents of Bayfield, I have, the first number on there, $17.20 for the weekly service of a bear-resistant cart. And that's the reliable waste charge. And, percentage-wise, that's a decent jump up from where we're at currently, which I don't love to be that trash man that, comes in and jumps up rates, but, there's a couple things I think we can talk about, ways we can maybe bring that down, but when we're talking about 100% brand new bear-resistant carts for the town of Bayfield, that's where the cost would be, and kind of like the worst-case scenario, so to speak. And then we'll move down, and we'll kind of circle back on maybe some ways we could knock that price down. For each additional cart, $11.15 a month. And then these costs, it's right there, include the use of 6 40-yard roll-off containers. And I don't have it specifically written there, but that works out to, every 200 cans is another 40-yard roll-off. And I think that might be a useful way to sort of scale up that service as the town continues to grow that's the fall and spring cleanup, service. And then Christmas tree removal, I think that was something that was mentioned once upon a time, and that would be something we'd be happy to do. We're there, hands on the trash anyway, it would be a Christmas gift, we'll say, from Reliable Waste to the town. So that's residential. Talking commercial service, the town has a few properties, I think, senior center, public works, and then town hall, and I might be missing some. But these, again, we're still talking bear-resistant commercial containers, 2-yard, 3-yard, 6-yard dumpsters, right there, you can see those prices, and I feel pretty good about those prices. I think they're strong, so those would probably stay there. And then, of course, if the town needed more dumpsters for different reasons, you could count on those prices going forward. That's it for commercial service. And then, talking about the wastewater treatment plant, the current hauler pulls that 20-yard roll-off of sludge, I believe is the technical term. And I maybe should have worded this different, because we don't have roll-off trucks or containers, but we have a good relationship with Durango Trash Panda, who I'm sure you guys know, their containers are all over the place. And he offered that price, and I'm not marking that up or trying to take anything from that, just, if the current hauler didn't want to continue doing that, that would be a solution to that potential problem. But, maybe your current hauler is doing a good job at that, and hey, if that's best for the town, then I'm all for it. So, the cost of cart service, there's a lot of big expenses, right, when you're running an operation like this, you guys understand that. Most of them, cost of trucks, labor, fuel, dump costs, a lot of that is kind of out of my control. But there's one thing I think that we might be able to work on, and that's the cost of the carts themselves. Those bear-resistant carts are stinking expensive, to be quite blunt. So there's a couple thoughts I had around that. One, when I wrote this, I was a little more optimistic about it than I am now. That is getting grants from CPW for that, because there's money to make the state more bear-resistant. And they're excited about the idea in general, except for that they've already given a grant to bear resist the town of Bayfield, so they weren't super optimistic about doing that again, which I can understand. I don't think it's totally out of the question, but I'm not very optimistic about that. The second thought, which is like a little bit more tricky, is that all the carts we need are already on the street and distributed So, I mean, my experience with Republic, the current hauler, is that they're pretty reasonable people when it comes down to it. And while I don't think they would be highly motivated to help me out, my hope would be that they would see well-used carts with an old company's name on it that are spread out all over town with trash in them, and they might be willing to let those go for a steep discount. Again, I think that would be very reasonable, especially since they, you know, took money to make it more bear resistant. It seems like maybe those carts should stay here, but at the end of the day, they're their carts, and so you know, we can't count on that by any means. The third thing, and I'm almost nervous to bring this up, is getting away from bear resistant carts. I am not trying to stir up a ruckus around this by any means. I know much of Bayfield that it is warranted to have those carts, and they're a big help to people. I also think that there's probably some areas where it's not necessary, and if we could have, there's a number of different ways you could do it. Certain neighborhoods, you know, certain cross streets, or maybe certain customers that are willing to be more responsible, that we could have some kind of mix of non-bear resistant and bear resistant, and those carts are significantly less expensive of an investment, and they're quicker on route too, so it would bring the cost down significantly. So, you know, I think $17.20 isn't a bad price. It's gonna be a superior service, you know, bet your money on it, but I would like to find some ways to bring that down and cut my expenses so we can cut the cost to the town. And these are a couple of them. I'm certainly open to more ideas. But the range we're working with, if we were to, and I'm not recommending this, if it was gonna be all non-bear resistant carts, I would do $13.96 for that single cart service, all the way up to all brand new bear resistant carts, did I say that right? For $17.20 a month. So that was a little bit, I don't know if I lost you guys on that, I was doing a lot of talking, but that's where we're at. So that $17.20 is worst case, $13.96 is best case, and it just depends a lot on what we can do for price of carts. But I just gotta say, I don't think price should be the number one thing. You do, after all, get what you pay for. There are some other services I put on here. There's a little bullet point list, and truthfully, that list could be longer, but what I'm trying to convey there is not these specific perks, but that going local comes with some maybe more intangible benefits. Like when you call with an issue, you're gonna talk to me, or probably my wife, and maybe my kids in the background. And like we're here in town. I mean, as it is now, even when I don't have the contract, I'm in or through town 4 days a week. We're at the Bayfield transfer station, so I mean, we're like right around the corner, ready to help out. So, yeah, my final thoughts there is just you go local. You know, it's a good bumper sticker and it makes you feel good, but it really does come with a superior level service, and I hope I can prove that to you guys. That was kind of my spiel right there that I had planned. There were some hard numbers in there, some softer things. What kind of questions do you guys have for me?
Aaron, would you just like Jeremy to explain what they're doing in Ignacio regarding
You got a good
the
deal?
choice of a bear-proof?
Oh, the bear-proof containers are by request, so not everybody has a bear-proof container. You can request them, and that's through the same vendor that you currently have, through Public Services, and they'll be more than happy to drop one off. Not sure if the cost varies. I don't have bear-proof containers, so I don't know, but that's how they handle it. And that might be a logical way to go. You know, if you have somebody that's having problems, they could request that bear-proof container, and then some people that don't. I just don't take my trash out till the day of, so, and that keeps the bears out.
Yeah.
Because my dog keeps the bear in the yard, so, but that's the way they handle it.
So, I wasn't on the board when we started with the bear-proof containers. Was that, if I'm understanding what went on here, there was a grant, and that's why we ended up with those?
I didn't know that there was a grant.
I just found that out today, actually.
Yeah.
I should let you know.
Well, and if it was paid with public money, then Republic Services is gonna kinda have a hard time taking, bear-proof trash cans that were paid with, CPW's money, and that's where that money's coming from. So I'd have to find that grant, I'm not too sure.
I'm not aware of any grant that,
I'm pretty sure there was a grant, because I remember having a conversation with Matt about it and saying he was the one that pushed for that, and he was.
but I don't, we weren't the recipients of the grant. The
Well,
town.
that's kind of what's surprising me right now, because he was talking to me quite a bit about that and said, we got a grant and everything. It's like, wait a minute, we don't even own the grant money went to the company?
I'm not aware of any grant. And
Well, if that's
the
the,
town the town was not a recipient of the grant that I'm aware of.
so if we did get a grant, then the containers are ours.
So, my guess is that I would have to go back, I would have to go and find some grant document, not knowing that it was through a grant. I don't know, Jeremy, do you remember anything?
The trash cans were delivered to the public works shop, and they were ordered and coordinated by WCA at the time. We told WCA, since they were our current vendor for the bear-proof containers, that we could make early delivery while they dispersed the carts and picked up the whole containers. So to the best of my knowledge, they were purchased through WCA, which was the vendor at the time. I don't think the town had anything to do with that order, to the best of my knowledge. We were just allowing them a spot at the shop to deliver the town and stage them for the residents.
Yeah, that was my understanding when I spoke to the gentleman with CPW, that it was a grant to WCA, not to the town itself, but for the purpose of the town.
So then it would seem to me that the town still could be open for getting a grant, and maybe that's something we can check on.
I think what happened is if they, typically, in all the experience I've had, the money that goes for the benefit of a local government, which this is, then they probably paid for it. But the thing is, it was intended for the town of Bayfield. So, now it's finding the right person to talk to say, could you send me the grant application, the contract, so I can see how it's worded? And that may be the easiest way to fight. I mean, every grant we get, we are committed to 20 years to holding property or whatever else. I can't believe it's only 5 years.
Yeah. Well, that would be great if we could get a contract, because then Michael could take a look at it. So I got a couple questions. First of all, I'm a strong believer in bear-resistant carts. They're a higher quality cart than the regular carts. They last longer. Bears get euthanized because people, humans will not be responsible for their garbage. And so I know that Durango has a strong bear cart, initiative there, and they do a lot to inform the people. So I'll say that right off the top. If you were able to buy the carts, is that something that we could kind of hold as a stipulation in the contract?
There's all kinds of things you can put in a contract.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, our attorney would review anything.
Yeah. So I'd be interested in throwing that in as an option for consideration. Where else do you service?
Bayfield's kind of center mass for my route, but I go up to Forest Lakes, down almost, not quite to Ardley's, Tiffany Corner, if you know that, and then all the way into Durango. That's sort of a triangle there. And then I do go east of town just a little bit to the county line.
What kind of a record do you have?
Sterling. What are you asking about, like length or?
Well, do you guys track customer complaints and, response times, and how well do you manage yourself?
Yeah, I take trash pickup pretty seriously, so there's not really any complaints to track at this point.
Can I actually jump in here?
Sure.
Sorry, because I know him well.
Yeah.
He doesn't like talking good about himself, so I'll jump in and do that. So, as you're talking about, trucks break down, right?
Right, sure.
And so, got a truck that lifts dumpsters, and then a backup truck that doesn't. And the truck that lifts dumpsters was breaking down time after time after time. That truck's no longer with us, but for 6 to 9 months, this guy was out every day of route, jumping in the dumpster and unloading it by hand into the back of the trash truck with a snow shovel to clean out all the edges every day for months because of his customers. Tomorrow is actually one of his first days not running the truck himself, and he's like, if that guy misses one can, and so it's, for what it's worth, and I don't wanna take up time, but I could add on stories. This guy loves to pick up trash, and honestly, we were riding the truck the other day, and he said, when I was a kid, I wanted 2 things. I wanted to be in the army, and I wanted to be a trash guy. And here's number 2.
Well, it is an essential service, so you have to have it, yeah.
It's a passion.
Right.
It's an absolute passion for him.
So I'm curious, Aaron, how many trucks do you have?
Right now I have 2 trucks. I have one main runner and then a backup truck that, doesn't lift dumpsters, so hopefully we don't need to run that anytime soon. And then I've got another truck coming right now, so I'll have two strong new trucks. The lesson we learned from that last one was don't buy used if you need to count on it. So we'll have 2 brand new trucks and then one spare, kind of in case of emergency there.
So how many trucks do you need to service Bayfield? 2?
Yeah, my thought would be to split it into 2 days. I like leaving margin in my day, and I wouldn't want to try to do the whole town in one day, and then you have a truck down, or heaven forbid, 2 trucks, and then things get pushed to the next day. If you leave a little space in the day, gives you time to get your flat fixed, or run somebody to an appointment, and then you still got time to finish the route. So that's
And the reason that would work well is just because of the division between the highway, the north and south side. So if we had a Tuesday delivery and a Thursday delivery, it's gonna take some time for people to get used to a different day, but, once they do, I think that's doable.
And how many employees do you have?
Well, it's me, Joel, my wife Victoria, and then I have 1 driver and then 1 gentleman who runs the transfer stations for me. So there's 5 of us.
Who's your mechanic?
I use, gosh, I'm blanking on his name. Jared Hansen down in, JR Farm and Auto. They're like a mobile mechanic. They haven't let me down yet.
Where are you located?
I live, right off County Road 514, just this side of Oxford. And then obviously we do some stuff out of the Bayfield transfer station, just off of 160 over here. So.
Well, it sounds like you're a little bit open to negotiating that price,
Well,
with or without bear carts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to, well, of course I'm trying to make money, but I'm not, the carts aren't something, that's just a cost that I'm passing through, and so if we could get that down, I'd be happy to pass that right on through to the town,
One option that probably takes more discussion down the road, and I don't know Bayfield's situation as far as finances, but the cart cost is really what brings that up. And so if you guys were to look at either with CPW or on your own at buying and you guys owning the carts and us servicing them, that price comes way down. So there is flexibility in that if we're not providing a brand new bear cart.
So have you ever bought bear carts from another company?
That's a new one for me. And I don't, I mean, you can think of it from their perspective, like, there's motives to make it as difficult as possible for me because, I am competition to them, but also it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for them to come back through and collect all these well-used carts. But, we take a very tactful conversation to make that happen. That's what he's for. He's the smooth talker over here, so.
And part of the reason that we're gonna do this early, I mean, we have some other rates we're gonna talk about, but, giving a contract out, having that conversation with public services about the trash is gonna take a little more time. So we're looking at kind of nailing a contract around July or the 1st of August, so there's plenty of time to make that transition, plenty of time to update the citizens about what's going on, and, the whole thing. So this is probably the one rate that I'm pretty sure we're not gonna wait until December, determine, because if not, it doesn't give enough leeway time. And after the pandemic, everything takes longer. It's been the supply chain, so.
I'm sorry. One other
I'll go ahead.
No, sorry. One other consideration is also that Republic coming after 5 years, I mean, we don't know inflation, where prices have gone. I'm not sure if Republic has submitted a proposal for the next 5 years or where their prices might be, but there might be less of a gap, or, you know, we're not sure where those prices are gonna come out at.
Yeah. Well, I have to say I'm kind of disappointed in them right now, just because they haven't responded to you. And, you know, and maybe because their contract is still in place, and who knows. But I think I'm a little concerned with your limited staffing. My husband was an equipment engineer for 30 years. And having maintenance done on the machines that they ran 24/7 was imperative to keep the business running. So if you don't have a mechanic on staff and one of your trucks go down, then there's an impact on that for sure, right? So, and both of your trucks are brand new?
They will be, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm a little concerned about that, so.
That's fair. I mean, I that mobile mechanic, I mean, he has never let me down in a pinch, so, and that's why I buy new, is because that is a very valid concern. You know, when I was running that used truck, and I don't even wanna tell you some of the patches I did to keep that thing running. That is not a sustainable plan. Buying new, you just cut down not only the maintenance cost, but that time, so you don't have to worry nearly as much about it, but I understand what you're saying, definitely.
Okay.
We have bears on our road, and we have plenty of neighbors that are sticking a little pin into their can so that they don't have to unsnap it. I'd like to see the bear-proof cans optional. For those who, not everybody, some humans take care of their trash. I take care of my trash. And I'd like to see, you know, people that are responsible, we can call and say, we just want a regular trash can. And those people that are fumbling to make the bear-safe trash can a regular trash can don't have to fumble anymore with it, and they get the reduced rate. So I'd like to see it as an option. I think cost is important, especially since we're gonna up all of our costs, you know, all of our utilities this year. That we have to watch every way that we can give the power to the person paying the bill to say, this is right for me.
Well, I'm curious what we can find out about that grant in
Yeah, that
in
too.
ownership of cans, because if we already own them, then it starts turning into a no-brainer for me, but until we have that answer, I don't know we can make any decision. Well, we don't have enough people to make a decision.
I mean, I've had their contact information, so,
Well, and actually, since you're a new and small operation, I would be interested in a stepped cost plan where we try you out. We see how you do. We give you a chance to prove yourself. And so the contract would be like, for the first year, we'd pay this, you know, for the second year, we'd pay this, and then we'd get up to a point where we were satisfied with your service. I'd like to see something like that.
and so the step plan, means there's an investment of track carts.
Mhm, mhm,
So what would your idea be with that plan?
mhm. Well, I'm basing this on, hopefully you can negotiate for the purchase of our carts. So these are just ways to approach this the best way that we can, that is cost-effective. And if you know, show that you're a reliable service, I'm open to the full payment.
Is there any issue with, 2-day pickups?
I don't see any.
I don't either. Mm-mm. No.
Did you, does anybody have any other questions? Did
No.
you have anything to add on Republic?
It's just waiting. I mean, I'll contact them again, but I don't know how many times. So, also waste services, the other big, the green trucks, I know that they did a quote for, trash pickup as well. And they were way over, WCA at the time, so I know they only had 2, responses, but we'll look into it. I mean, I think there's some, looking into it, but I guess probably from, and I'm sorry, there's only 3 of you here tonight, is are you willing to consider this and kind of nail down some of these specifics? I'm not saying that, we have a contract, but willing to kind of continue this conversation.
Yes, I
Yes.
am,
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, because I don't think the people around town are real happy with what we
No.
have now. That's one of the complaints I've heard a lot about.
Mhm.
So the biggest issue that I have is that they'll dump the cart and dump the cart into the truck and the cart's gone. And, or they dump the cart and the trash ends up in the street and the cart is put back down and it's empty, but the trash is all over the street. So, paying attention, I think, is important.
Yeah. Seen a lot of trash on the road.
Mhm.
And then when it was, what were they, GFL? I mean, there was a joke in our neighborhood, they called it Green for Life, and all they were doing was dropping transmission fluid all over the road. Didn't seem very green. Anything else on trash?
Well, so maybe let me ask, like, what is next? I know we gotta do some Sherlock work on this grant and these cans. And I think maybe it's time for me to start the conversation about purchasing those. I just didn't wanna.
Yeah, I have this letter here, but it's still not telling me if it was the town or not. It's September 2019, so something must have happened earlier than that. So I'll look into it. And the conversation would be, I guess, talk to JC, if that's the only person I can talk to, and saying, we may change what's your option of giving up those cans if we can't find some other strings attached to that funding.
Yeah.
And our bear community, probably will have something to say about that as well. That the money was given and then it ends up in New Mexico,
Yeah, that.
where we're based out of,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
Well, that was good information.
Yeah, I was kinda surprised by that today, so I'm glad I found that out in time to stir up a little drama, you know?
Mhm.
Drama's good. We'll move on to the water study and rates, which I believe would be Mr. Omar.
Certainly. Do we have ability to pull up a PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, you'll have to
Nicole.
talk to our audio-visual expert over there.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Just got 14 slides, so.
Thank you.
Michael,
Not really, but I will if I am needed.
time required, I think is what he's saying. Yeah.
All right, so I prepared a relatively short PowerPoint presentation just to help us walk through the findings from the water and sewer rate study. So just a quick introduction for anyone who doesn't know me. My name is Steve Omer, engineer with Plummer Associates. Our regional office is in Durango, and this is actually my third time assisting with a rate study for the town of Ada. Next slide, please, Nicole. And just a quick overview, there's three major facets to the rate study. Cost of service analysis is where we look at sort of the fair sharing of costs between the building categories. And then the rate analysis looks at past and future revenues versus expenditures and make sure that we have appropriate funds coming in to cover not only the regular operation and maintenance, but also any debt service requirements, some operational reserves. Make sure that there's always some money to work with. And then we also did a review of plant investment fees, and those are a one-time fee, sometimes hear them referred to as a TAP fee or a system development charge. And those are held in reserve to fund major projects. And one thing I was realizing on my drive over here that I did not get into this set of slides is to let you all know that all the calculations in this study are based on the American Water Works manual practice M1, which deals specifically with setting rate and service charges for water and sewer infrastructure. And also I saw a recent study from them comparing plant investment fees and across different municipalities. Was also a good reference along the way. Next slide, please, Nicole. So just jumping in a little more detail about cost of service analysis. As I mentioned, it's really looking at whether there's an equitable distribution of costs to the various billing categories and making sure that everyone is paying a reasonably fair share for the services they're receiving. So we looked at metered water consumption versus billing for all customers that have a water meter, basically everyone in town, and tried to compare that across all categories, including the out-of-town customers. And for sewer, as was mentioned, I think Katie mentioned a little bit ago, the sewer service rates are based on an average of winter water usage, and those numbers are reflected in the spreadsheet of billing records that I received from the town to work with, and so we did use those to assess the cost versus usage for sewer. And then we also did a specific review for the Gem Village lift station. That's something since the last rate study I was involved in for the town. There's been some improvements in ability to monitor. There's a flow meter installed now. And so we reviewed electric usage, O&M records for Gem Village lift station and compared that to the lift station fee that is assessed to out-of-town commercial customers. Next slide, please. And so this slide is just summarizing the results of that cost of service analysis. And for this one, because it's fairly simple, I lumped the water and sewer together. In the subsequent categories for rate analysis and plant investment fees, we'll deal with water and sewer separately. But for the cost of service analysis, we did find that there's a reasonably fair distribution of cost to the various billing categories. So no real need to shake things up between the way things are billed now, between one category versus the other. And did find that the out-of-town lift station fee assessed for the Gem Village lift station is bringing in a monthly revenue of $2,700, and looked at the long-term cost records between LPA billing and operation and maintenance records provided by the Public Works Department, and found that the monthly investment in that lift station is approximately $2,900. So it's looking like a pretty fair use compared to your other lift stations. The Gem Village lift station is typically consuming anywhere from, say, $330 to $400 of electricity on a monthly basis. The other lift stations are typically between less than 50 or definitely less than 100. And if you add all three together, they're still roughly a third of the cost to run the Gem Village lift station. So it does look like that fee that was added in is helping to even out costs for the expense of running lift stations around the entire collection system. Next slide, please, Nicole. And for the rate analysis, I always kind of think of this one as like the balancing of the checkbook. If you have enough coming in to cover what's going out. And so we look at the previous 5 years of revenue and expense records based on the annual audits. We also include the budget for the current year as for what's planned. And then we use that information along with some reasonable estimates of inflation for the continued incrementing of costs over the continuing 5-year planning period, and try to look at how the expenses versus revenue are going to compare. And so the major categories that we're looking at for revenue are fairly simple because that's all coming from the monthly billings. The expenses are a little longer list. Looking at your operation and maintenance expenses, your minor capital improvements, which is where you're making a small replacement but not changing capacity. Payments to loans, which a lot of times the major investments for water and sewer infrastructure are funded through a combination of plan investment fees and loans and grants, which are sought from state and federal funding agencies. But the monthly income has to make the repayment on those loans as needed. And when you do have those loans, it comes with a requirement to maintain debt service reserves, which is typically 10% of your annual repayment value. And then operating reserves have been held at 25% of the annual expense for the water or sewer fund. And I did review a paper from AWA that I mentioned where they compared 6 to 8 different municipalities who all held a range typically between 20 and 40% of annual expenses for their operating reserve. So it's a 25% is one of the most common, and it's a very justifiable level of reserve to hold to make sure that you do have some funds if something unexpected comes up. And we also look at the depreciation schedule and the impacts to overall value within the system. Next slide, please. And then for the graph on this page is admittedly a bit busy, so let's kind of walk through that starting from top to bottom. For the years in the past, from 2018 through 2023, where you're just seeing fewer lines than you see over to the right, those are the records of revenue and expense based on the annual audits. And the top red line, the kind of diamond-shaped dots, is the annual revenue. The blue line is showing the annual expenses. And then moving further down, that next red line is the operating balance. So that's your income minus expenses. And then the thinner kind of grayish line below that, that's your operating balance minus reserves. So that's showing how much do you have left to cover those reserves within the funds. And so then as we move further to the right from 2024 and beyond, you see some of those lines split apart into red and yellow. And that's the difference between the yellow then is showing what would be predicted if there was no change in current rates, and the red is showing what's predicted if there is a change in current rates. And I think the big takeaway here is that for the last couple of get that, adjusted revenue balance minus reserves back above that zero line. And to make that happen, we're recommending a series of 10% rate increases over the following 3 years. And that's really intended to try and minimize the impact. It's no one wants to see a 30% rate increase all at once. Yes, it would get the fund back in balance quicker, but you're not spending more than you're making, you're just on the edge of not having those reserves covered. So doing it a little more gradually, I think, is justifiable, to minimize the impact on customers and get this fund back to where the reserves are being held in the account. Next slide, please, Nicole. The sewer fund is in a similar place. However, it is not, we're not seeing that, balance with reserves, diving below zero, but it is predicted to do so without an increase in rates. And so we evaluated and came up with a need for 15% total increase, and again recommend that that be spread out over the following 3 years to help minimize that impact and spread it out, and make sure that the sewer fund also maintains adequate reserves within the balance. And those reserves can be especially important when you go after your next major capital project, because the funding agencies will review all this information, and if they don't see that you're able to provide those reserves, they might require a rate increase at that time. I have seen instances where that can happen, that if you're working with a funding agency and they come back and say, you're not bringing enough income for us to give you this loan, you're gonna have to go raise rates. It's better to have yourself in a better position before you're going after that loan and having that conversation. Next slide, please. So moving into plant investment fees, as I mentioned before, these are a one-time collection from new customers attaching to the system, and they're intended to fund major capital projects and system expansion to meet the needs of growth within your customer base. And these fees are governed within the state of Colorado by the Colorado Revised Statute 2920-104.5. And I just outlined a few of the major requirements. It is somewhat of a lengthy document, but essentially it boils down to the fee must be generally applicable across categories. It needs to be published and established ahead of time. You can't just arbitrarily assess it. Is essentially what that first bullet is saying. It's intended to defray the projected impacts on capital facilities caused by proposed growth, so that you're not trying to pay for increased facility capacity through your monthly fees. Your monthly fees are really just meant to cover the O&M, debt service, and operating reserve requirements. And another important thing to keep in mind, based on the Colorado statute, is that capital improvement investments must have an estimated useful life of at least 5 years or longer. I definitely prefer the longer category for water and sewer infrastructure. 5 years goes by in the blink of an eye. Next slide, please. And so for the water fund, and this is where we start to address water and sewer separately, because there's a little more to talk about than we had for the cost of service analysis. The water fund does seem to be bringing in an appropriate amount, and the existing plan investment fees are based on the size of the water meter, and in-town customers pay slightly less than out-of-town customers, but in each category that cost is incremented based on the size of the water meter, which is a common and appropriate approach to take for that. Because if you're giving someone a bigger water meter, they're going to have a bigger impact on your system. There is one major capital investment project planned for the water fund during the planning period, and that is an expansion of the intake capacity at the Los Pinos pump station. That pump station takes, on pumps it up to the treatment plant. And currently, there's more pump capacity than there is ability to get water into the wet well for those pumps to move it up the hill. And that's something that has been planned to be addressed and was included in the last water master plan.
When is that scheduled?
That was actually listed as a to be determined. I have it penciled in for purposes of this rate study. That is the bump that you see in 2027 on that blue line. But that is, I know some of the water operators would like to see that done sooner than later. But it is one of those things that was left kind of officially unscheduled in the master plan.
So if we put in that east side intersection, though, that date's gotta move up, correct? Because we'll need more capacity, we'll need more water at that point?
I think growth's gonna determine that a lot.
That's what I'm saying.
What we would like to do is not be trying to play catch up. I think in the future, if the east intersection does go in, and you see the development start coming, 27 could be appropriate, we'd wanna get that installed and be ready for the future growth, rather than pushing it further down the road and then trying to catch up with that capacity. We still do have the ability to move water through the Los Pinos ditch, so you could run them in tandem. There's some of that ability as well.
Absolutely, and the ditch is the more cost-effective means of providing water to the treatment plant, because it's running by gravity, and all you have to do is let it flow out of the ditch into the storage reservoir above the plant. Versus for the pump station, that's more of a backup source, and you do have to pay that electric bill to pump the water up the hill at that point. So it is much more efficient to use the ditch to the maximum ability.
There's water quality that we take into consideration as well.
A better water quality on the ditch?
No, a lot of times you get better water quality through the pump station, because we're drawing through an infiltration gallery that goes up the river. Or sometimes if we get a lot of organic sediment, which Michael can talk a little bit more about that, he works out on that daily, but we'll opt to switch to pumping the water and accrue a little bit more electrical cost to have more quality water and have to take less organics out of it when we're treating it for quality issues.
You also have to account
That's
for
an operational.
a 10% water loss through the ditch as well due to evaporation. So you can minimize that loss by pumping it.
Which is a lot in the summer. 10% is pretty significant in the summer.
Can be.
So yeah, that's just the one capital expense, but overall, the incremented rate structure for the plan investment fees on the water side appear to be doing a good job of maintaining. Sorry, I spread out here. And positioning the system for future expansion. But yes, the timing of that pump station improvement project could definitely be shifted. We had a study done, several years ago, I think it was right before COVID, where a group recommended use of vertical wells rather than additional infiltration pipes out under the river, but they felt those would be more cost effective to increase that capacity. But that's not entirely germane to the rate discussion today.
Yeah, you're over my head there.
Just know that we've had some experts at pulling water from rivers and ground sources look at that and give recommendations on how to expand the system. Any more questions on this one? Okay, and I don't think I said it before, but please feel free to stop me and interrupt, ask questions at any time. Next slide, please. The sewer capital investment fee and investment fee is currently a flat rate for in-town customers, and as is typical, the out-of-town customers pay slightly more, but it's currently a flat rate regardless of meter size. And so this is moving into more of a table-based presentation of the proposed updates to the water rates. And as we showed before on that cash flow graph, they're suggesting 10% a year. And in the draft reports that you have in the full packet, I do show tables like this for all of the billing categories, but I didn't want to put up half a dozen slides of just almost the same table. But to summarize each of the billing categories, we would suggest incrementing the costs by 10% per year for the next 3 years. Just to help spread out that cost and minimize the impact to customers. Next slide, please, Nicole. It's a very similar slide for the sewer rates. And again, just picked 2 tables to show as a summary, but this should be carried through to all of the existing billing categories to increment their cost by 5% annually for the next 3 years to help make sure that we can maintain debt service and operating reserves within the fund. Next slide, please. And then this slide presents the recommended updates to the sewer plant investment fees. There are no recommended updates to the water plant investment fees. Those are sufficient for now, based on the study. But we did run through a standard incremental cost approach as described in the AWA M1 manual and arrived at the base fee for a 3/4 inch meter, and then used standard equivalents of meter sizes to help increment the costs beyond that. And those are another table that I didn't include here, but you can find these tables of the standard equivalents of meter sizes. And so just put one example in here that a 1-inch meter is considered to be able to draw 1.66 times more water than a 3/4 inch meter. And therefore, that's the justification in the implementation of the plant investment fees, that if they're going to have the ability to draw 1.66 more times water, they're going to have the ability to put that much more into sewer, and so their plant investment fee is also incremented based on that number. Any questions about the proposed plant investment fee structure? Okay, last slide. Any questions about the water and sewer rates in general?
Well, it seems to me that our current water fee structure is based on drought, so severe and extreme. And we have incremental increases for that. This didn't take in that concern. How is that viewed with these fees? I mean, does that 10% address and I believe that we're using the incremental drought fees to encourage people to use less water. But again, I don't know that it's represented here, or did it apply, or let me know about that.
You bring up a good point, and you're reminding me that those drought rates did not make it into the draft memo,
Mhm.
and I believe that they should.
Mhm.
In general, the incrementing block rate that is applied to residential customers, to where your first 6,000 gallons is covered by the base fee, and then if you use more than that, you're paying more per 1,000 gallons, and that increments up. That structure itself is intended to promote water conservation.
Mhm.
In that, that person that wastes a lot of water or invests it growing an ice cream lawn, to give you perspective, they're gonna pay more for that.
Mhm.
The drought fees that are built into the current rate structure. My understanding is those are based on kind of a different increment, to where if the, you know, water rights get called out and the town can't take water in through the Los Pinos ditch anymore, then you're gonna have to run those pumps at the river. Expenses are gonna go up. And I think those additional rates should also be incremented based on the percentages that were presented for the base rates.
Okay.
And that tiered rate structure is tied to the town's drought management plan as well.
Yes.
So we do have another document that's not necessarily for the rate structure that Mr. Elmer was working on, that delineates that severe and extreme drought with those additional increases in cost for the customers.
Yeah. I'm just trying to imagine the managed impact to our citizens. And I do think it's important. I'd love if human beings were responsible for their actions, but they're not. So, you know, you don't want to have to, I always thought it'd be a better way than penalizing citizens for water use to actually reward them, but I think that doesn't work as well with humans. So that, I'd like to see how that would play out, because the truth of the matter is that we've got declining precipitation, have had it for the last 20 years. So it's apparent to me that we are woefully underfunded across the board. And if I looked at the grants that are available out there, and we have to either have money to match or to the point of the reserves to take out a loan, being able to cover that loan. And so I think that this slipped through the cracks over the years. You know, the town leadership maybe wasn't monitoring this as well as they should, or maybe things have just caught up, or it's a combination of all of that plus growth. But and I understand why you've suggested the rate increase over 3 years. And my thought is your belief is, over those 3 years, once we've hit the third year, we should be taking in enough revenue to offset into the future for how long?
You know, ideally, you would repeat a rate study every 5 years. And so that is the planning period, is 5 years into the future. And so, yes, I do believe that based on the current projection of expenditures, as you probably noticed on those cash flow projection graphs, the expenses to the system have increased substantially,
Yes.
almost twofold, over the past 5 years. I think we've all experienced the increase in costs ever since COVID. There's, you know, also, I think it's great that the Public Works Department is no longer understaffed. The last time I helped do one of these studies for the town, they were operating on a skeleton crew, and the truth is that helped minimize costs. So now it is costing more to run these enterprises, but ideally, no one's getting worked to death in the process. You know, hopefully that will lead to more stable staffing and other benefits.
Well,
I
yeah.
just want to address
Go right
the
ahead.
drought,
Yes.
because, in our exhibit B in the resolution, it actually has basically the percentages off to the right.
Yes.
So, you know, and I think in a lot of ways, it's certainly something that plumbers, that they could address, but also looking at, you know, is it, if you have a 10% increase in all rates, are you looking for maybe a 15% in the severe, and then, you know, another big jump in extreme? And I think that's also something, you know, it's not necessarily based on you know, our operating expenditures. Is now, it's costing to reduce people's use of water. But that's another way that you can look at implementing a drought rate on top of the rates that, that he's proposed.
Well, I understand the necessity the math is there. I think, how do we bring that to the public in a way that is consumable? And I don't know if how the numbers would work out in the long run if we didn't do it in 3 years. And I understand that we're on a kind of a timeline to sort of, shorten up the cost to revenue and also put it into our reserves. But I'm wondering how it would work out financially to maybe set up a higher hit in the beginning and then extend it out 5 years, and then, so 10% the first year and then extend out that rate increase over some time. If we could sort of set a goal to get our revenues up, but do it in a more, I think, fair sense of it. It's balancing what we must do or what we need to do also with what people will receive well.
So, so the drought plan is, the intent is not to make money.
Well, I'm not talking about the drought. I'm
Oh.
talking, I'm sorry, Katie, I
Okay.
jumped. I'm sorry, I jumped, yes.
Yeah, for the sewer fund where we're recommending the lower 5% for 3 years,
Mhm,
that one is still maintaining appropriate reserves,
mhm,
but it is projected to lose those in the next couple of years. That one, I think, could easily be spread out.
mhm,
The water fund where the adjusted revenue is really just breaking even right now.
mhm,
And if we try to account for reserves, that puts the balance into the red.
right,
That one, we could certainly look at options to try and spread that out longer and see
Mhm.
what the impact is on bringing that
mhm,
line back where we'd like to see it.
mhm.
But it would spread out that time period before that is restored
Yeah.
and providing those proper reserves.
It just seems to me, and again, not doing the math on it, but the 10%, 10%, 10% might be a bit. But in truth, we have to have a good public service operation. And, right now, there's so much money available. When I think about after the financial crisis of 2009, there was no money to be had, and people were hurting, including municipalities and whatnot. So right now, there's quite a bit of money out there to try to get to offset the costs for our community. But if we don't have the reserves there to accomplish that, we're gonna lose out. So, I don't know, it's tough, but I think, we're gonna have to do a really good job of explaining why these rate increases are necessary.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing I've heard a lot of too, is people are complaining about the rates and they're constantly going up and how much more they're paying now than they were just like 5 years ago.
Yeah, the operating expenses have roughly doubled
Mhm.
over the past 5 years.
Mhm.
They appear to be starting to level out. But it is hard to tell
Mhm.
what the future's gonna bring.
Right.
And the operating reserve is a best practice.
Mhm.
The debt service reserve
Mhm.
is a requirement.
Mhm. Yes.
And so, when you think about the cost of, utilities or to the individual household,
Yes.
we do have a utility relief,
Mhm.
that's being used more and more, we're happy to see it. And really, it's the simple process, if they are economically challenged in their home,
Mhm.
they can apply to LEAP. All they have to do is show documentation that they're eligible for LEAP, So, you know, those that, and I'm sorry, those that can't afford it,
Right.
you know, this is what the rate has been proposed, and those that can't, then there's another, option. And the one thing that I learned, early on is that, Black Hills, that you'll actually get the money in advance as well,
Oh,
to pay your utilities.
interesting.
So, you know, those are things that you need to be aware of, that if, it just educating them, to fill out that LEAP application. It's closed right now, but it's usually open November 1st to the end of April. So all those options are out there.
Well, it just costs more these days to do anything. It's just a fact. It's everywhere. So I'm concerned about not having futuristic, you know, thoughts about this and trying to, you know, whittle away at it so we don't find ourselves in a really bad position because we haven't raised rates.
So the reason that we were low-staffed
Yeah.
is because we were training them, and then they were leaving and going somewhere else for a better,
Okay.
salary.
Yep.
And we've made a lot of changes to bring those rates up as competitive as we can. We know that we're doing a salary survey right now, and, you know, those are some areas where I saw some, you know, increases that you may be looking at to basically keep good operators. If not, we become just a training ground and they go somewhere else.
Yep. Yep. Well, it's a hard pill to swallow, but, you know, you just have to do it, in my opinion. I'd like to find a softer way to do it, maybe but again, if the numbers don't work out, if we're, you know, falling below the ability to, you know, service our debt or service our reserves, that can catch up with you too.
Yeah, it's, you know, one of the major reasons for having an operating reserve, is, you know, kind of like having a little money in your savings. You don't know when you're gonna have a tire blow out or
Right.
pump blow up and those are minor capital costs. Those come out of the regular operating and maintenance fund. And it's unpredictable. You need to have something there to cover that when that moment happens.
Well, thank you for this report. It was very, very helpful, very enlightening, somewhat troubling. I don't know, Katie, has the town had suppressed rates for quite a while until, like the last 4 years?
So my understanding after the last rate study that they didn't make the changes. Kathy's gonna shake her head.
I believe that the rate change that you're referring to was, we were supposed to like give 5% this year and then the next year or 2 years later do the other 5%. And we did the initial increase and management instructed us not to do the others, so we never did the second increase.
So that speaks
So-
to me that we're playing catch-up.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
I can count on, I've been here since 2009, and I can count on one hand how many times we've raised rates.
That's part of the problem.
That's exactly our problem.
Well, and it's because it's up to the board every year, and that doesn't always, I mean, depending, you know, the board sits there, and I'm not, it is what it is. But they sit there one year and they're like, okay, well, we need to get caught up on this, and then the next year, they're like, oh, man, we just raised them last year, we can't do this again. And then it doesn't happen. And it's just, it is what it is. I mean, and that's just the way the boards go. And then you change hands on the board and then it gets forgotten or whatever. I mean, just, things happen. Life happens.
Well, and I think our fee increase would be structured through a resolution, and hopefully that would hold and carry us down the road a bit. I feel like I had one more question. Oh, I know. How does this break up into the enterprise fee or utility that we've established? How does that, is that part of the reserve? Is that how that operates? Or explain that to me, how this works with the enterprise utility or enterprise fee.
So, an enterprise based on Tabor,
Mhm.
it acts like a business.
Yes,
So in other words, whatever money you bring in is, for revenue, is what needs to be spent on that business.
okay.
And, so the garbage fund, sewer fund, water fund are all enterprise. They operate like a business. There's
Mhm.
revenue that comes in to pay for the services that go out.
Mhm.
The other funds, are government funds, and they're considered, they're not run like a business, they're run more like a government.
Mhm. Mhm. So these fees go into that? I mean, that's part of the enterprise, right?
They're the budget, I have the budget here, the budget's very, it segments
Yeah.
where those funds are going.
Yep. And I was pretty sure that I understood that, but I just wanted to verify that. Okay, well,
Is there any other questions for Steve?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your input.
I may have more questions, so, at some point, and I'll run them through Katie and we'll get them out to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you very much. You did a good job with that. It was very understandable.
So today is the end of May,
Yes, ma'am.
and typically we adopt these towards the end of the year for the following year.
Mm-hmm.
From the four of you, is that the way you'd like to continue that? Now, keep in mind, this may be forgotten, but we're gonna bring it back up. And if there's any edits that we need to send to Steve before it's final, I think that's maybe what he's asking for.
Well, I think it's an absolute necessity. I just do. I think we have to address this. We have to make a decision on it. And so I put it right up there at the top with stormwater, what we're going to do about stormwater. So this is like a top priority, in my opinion.
And I think, just pondering a little bit more about how to communicate this to the public, I think one good way to think about it is to compare the rate increases to what has happened with inflation in
Yes.
recent years.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is, I think the sewer increases are less than recent inflation,
Mm-hmm.
but it's what the fund needs. The water increases are probably about on par
Mm-hmm.
with recent inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize 30% is a lot,
Mhm.
but I think that's another way to think about it and possibly communicate it.
Right. I agree.
So when you talk about changing boards, the other way that my experience with other municipalities is they adopted a resolution that had an automatic inflationary increase in it that you've already adopted. So, December of 2025 comes around and December 2026, if you don't change it, now you have the right as authority to change any resolution at any time, then it just keeps going. So it doesn't come back to the board, but then it is a public education process that, by the way, these are what the rates are gonna be,
Mm-hmm.
for your next bill.
Yeah.
That does alleviate, a board making that decision every year, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the board can't change that at any
Mhm.
time.
I actually really like that because then the public knows what's coming.
Right.
They can wrap their head around it. And I think also sending out a letter specifically to everybody who lives in town with the point of inflation, representation of why we have to raise these rates, and then also the fact that the
It's in
town.
newsletter.
Yeah, well, actually, more than a newsletter, I feel like this is a really big deal. So I would even say, a lot of people don't look at a newsletter. It might be worth it for us to send out an actual letter with graphs, with a good explanation, and, even, we suppressed rates for this many years, and that chicken has come to roost, and we just have to bite the bullet. And it's not gonna be comfortable for everybody, but in truth, you keep kicking this can down the road, and it's gonna get worse. And it's gonna get harder for the town to recover or get money, get funding. And, you know, I'm all about getting funding from other places, I mean, grants especially. So we should, you know, apply ourselves in a way that we can take advantage of that. And if we don't have the funds there, the reserve there, then,
So do you have interest? Keep in mind that the rate study was done by another engineering company.
sure,
And like I said, a drought study and drought rates are not intended to make money.
right,
The
no,
goal is to reduce water usage. I
Mhm.
think that's really important for you to understand.
yes.
So I don't know if you would like, Steve to go back and look at that, or, you know, is there something else that you'd like to add regarding that?
I think I'd like to see that. You know, I'd like to see what that looks like built into the rate structure that you have offered. Just so I know, I've got the whole picture. I like to have it all instead of piecemealing this together. And it is, in fact, you know, in play now. So I think that would be a good idea. And I understand that it's to try to control or penalize people in a way to say, would you please manage your water?
Yeah,
You
it's
know.
on a good year, you might never use those rates.
Exactly.
And so while they are intended to reduce water usage
Mm-hmm,
and bring in some extra money,
mm-hmm.
they're not what you can count on a month-to-month basis.
Correct, yes, yeah. Yeah, I would like to see that. And I, again, I'll just speak for myself, but I think that this is a top priority. And I really like the idea of putting an inflation clause into the resolution and doing our darndest to educate our community so they understand, and then giving them enough leeway to prepare that it's coming. So I almost feel like the sooner the better, that we can do this in a way that we set a date for when these are gonna kick in, but we give the community enough notice so they can wrap their head around it.
Is there any other direction?
No,
One thing that I'd like to mention about the drought increases, when we do move into a severe extreme drought, it costs the water enterprise more money to move that water and treat it.
Mhm.
We go on to storage water, that's an additional expense, once we drop right up priority, so that tier structure isn't necessarily meant to punish,
Mhm.
it's meant to cover your costs.
Sure,
Otherwise, those operational reserves that
Mhm.
Mr. Omar was talking about
Mhm.
earlier will start spiking down as well. So that's where those increases are really designed to do, is cover the additional operational costs during severe extreme drought.
well, and I also think that the community doesn't know what that cost is. It's like 3 times. If we drop in our priority or we have to go into our reserves from Vallecito, it is quite expensive. And I don't think people have that knowledge. I was surprised when I did a ton of water research and learned that myself. So we should also include that in our educational letter and prep letter, I think. I think the town can, you know, tolerate it more if they fully understand what we're up against, and it's really not a choice. It's sort of a need to.
Yeah, and just to tag on to that thought, because I think you're both bringing up really good points, is not everybody understands the way water rights work.
Mm-hmm,
And that the town might lose their ability to take water from the ditch, which is the
Mhm.
most economical way to get water to the treatment plant. Because somebody has more senior water rights, even if it's just a farm or a ranch, someone would
Mhm.
try to say, oh, the municipality should be more important.
mm-hmm,
And I might be one of those people, but I respect the way the water rights law is written in the state
mm-hmm.
is not structured that way.
Right, absolutely. Well, I think I have what I need right now.
everybody else good?
Mm-hmm.
Steve, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions, please relay.
You bet, will do.
Next, we'll move on to stormwater.
Hey, I'm Catherine Corella with SGM, and Eric is on the line. Hello. Author of the master plan.
And, so stormwater's been a big topic of conversation, ever since we started, as your uncle engineer. And we're familiar with the 2014 master drainage plan that was done for the town and kind of sat on a shelf. But we've dug into it a lot since Nicole coming on board and us doing all of your development review. It's been a really important resource for us, to evaluate where new development fits into the master drainage plan. So, maybe you're gonna have to help me with the whole history of the stormwater utility.
Well, the stormwater utility, what came out of a storm that we had, and I believe this was 2022, it was June of 2022, where we had, the 100-year or 500-year storm that certainly did a lot of damage to personal property in our town. And this has been basically one of those plans on the goals that's prior to me. This is the 2014 plan, master drainage plan, and it just seems like as we're growing, especially as Bayfield's growing, there's a real need to have a stormwater enterprise. So last year, the board adopted an ordinance that actually created a stormwater enterprise, and that also, we were also in the getting a feasibility study as well, so that we understood exactly what the issues were. We updating this plan, going to a new plan, and then determining what it's gonna cost. Because what had happened in 2014 is that they had a plan, and then we lost a culvert. I don't know if you remember when we shut down Mountain View because the Schroeder ditch caved in. And so then we started replacing culverts because, having a plan and having some great ideas but not actually doing it was starting to create some real issues in town. We've kind of come to this point. We've got a feasibility study. There was a point where we had a little increase in the cost of the feasibility study. But USDA has determined, if you determine to go ahead with an enterprise, that they will reimburse us for the cost of the feasibility study, if that's the direction you go.
Good to know.
I think that's good. Yeah, so, it's my understanding that stormwater maintenance is mostly not done, it's mostly done on a reactionary basis as opposed to a scheduled basis, but it's just not been a priority as much as the water and sewer utilities have been. It kind of gets stuck in the streets budget, but also gets, pushed aside when other things like the visible streets and sidewalks need to be repaired instead. So drainage is, and it's this way for every community, drainage is kind of that invisible infrastructure that nobody wants to think about or nobody prioritizes. It always kind of falls to the bottom. That being said, I was pleased to learn that over 50 communities in Colorado have set aside and began a stormwater utility. Nationwide, there's over 2,000 communities I found in my research. As of 2003, there's 2,200 dedicated stormwater utilities. Most of these are coastal communities where stormwater and drainage and flooding is a major problem, but 50 of them are here in Colorado. So I was able to grab some comparable rates to just share with you. We're not quite there yet by any means, but I'll catch you up to speed on where we are and what we've been up to this past year. And if you have any questions, please stop me and Eric and I will answer them. So over the last year, we've analyzed your 2014 master drainage plan. We've received a stormwater model from the previous consultant. They were great to work with. And we did field survey on several areas that we didn't think were right based on some of our experience, some of the town's experience, and just, verified sizes, updated the model with correct pipe sizes, manhole depths, that sort of thing. Reran the model. Also, we updated the storm event. Historically, engineers have run, so-called worst storm being a 24-hour event. But in reality, that is so rare here, and a really intense 2-hour event is actually what's gonna stress out your system more, and that's what happened in 2022, was just a really fast, intense storm. So that's the storm we chose to run, and updated the model with that information. We came up with, as you can see in the table, several pipes that are undersized, several inlets that are undersized, and then several new projects that we recommend where there are no stormwater relief. And then we also looked at ponds. The ponds are kind of an ongoing issue because there hasn't been good tracking of whether or not they were sized appropriately at the beginning. It's really hard to go back and resize a pond. So the best medicine is maintenance. And the town doesn't own the pond, so that is something we've been considering is maybe the town should own the pond so that we can maintain them and have control over them. When the ponds fill up and spill, that is another huge property damage that we're worried about.
So let's just talk a little bit about HOA ponds.
Yeah.
But the thing that we've learned and working with the HOAs, they really don't understand the importance of taking care of their stormwater. You know, they wanna make sure the snow is shoveled off the sidewalks, that maybe there's public open space that's taken care of, but the stormwater is like, you know, it's not really an issue. And our attendance at the Cinnamon Heights HOA meetings for a couple of years is just like, it's just kinda out of sight. Let's take care of siding and dog bags, and we've heard a lot about dog pickup bags at those meetings. But, you know, the stormwater pond is just not an issue, and it's just amazing how much silt and that they just have not been managed. Sunrise Estates is somehow we got ownership of the ditch, but we don't have control of the stormwater pond, that's theirs. So here we have a ditch that goes into a stormwater pond that's not our responsibility to manage, and they do have an active HOA,
And it does need repair.
and it does need repair. And that's why we have ranchers on the south side of the street or road that are complaining because they do get problems from Sunrise Estates.
So, we've developed some preliminary budgets and preliminary priorities, just based on everyone's experience on town staff and their experience with what floods and flooding issues, on their property. And then we, combine those into tables and maps so that, you know, we can start, some projects. Each project is, you know, different in its complexity. And when you're out in the streets and digging up utilities, typically you're gonna contract that out. That's not gonna be something that the town staff does in-house. If you're on the side of the right of way, that's a different story. But a lot of pipes are in streets, will need traffic control, will be complex. So the prices used to budget these projects are all based on contractor prices, not in-house material prices. And, you know, things vary. We didn't verify the depth of every single manhole and curb inlet in town. You know, a 5-foot depth curb inlet is gonna be a different price than a 15-foot curb inlet. So, just take the prices with a grain of salt. They could be higher than it really will be. It could be lower than it really will be. But the point is, we needed to start with something. We needed a number so that we can know how much it's gonna cost us. We've identified $3.4 million in just construction costs. We anticipate another 15% required for, this would be, you know, this is your whole system, present day costs. If you were to go out and fix the things that are undersized right now. And then we've added 15% on top of that for engineering, surveying, design. We've added another 15% for contingency. So that's a total $4.5 million capital improvements alone. The pond improvements are actually not that much, you know, dredging the ponds. We think it'll be less than $100,000
we don't, if they're not our, it's not our property, it's not our responsibility.
So we mentioned, one way to make sure that gets done is to, say, we're sending you notice, if you don't maintain your pond, we'll do it for you, and then we'll send you the bill. And then operating and maintenance costs, that's like your staff and labor and your equipment. We think that'll range, but just based on what the town is doing right now for example, your sewer system. I mean, this is an entire utility that has not been jetted, has not been mucked out regularly. So it's gonna be high at first, there's a lot to be done, but once a schedule is established and the equipment is purchased, it could go down. So right now, the sewer system maintenance, operation maintenance is like between 200 and 300 grand per year. And so the stormwater system would be that too, we believe, hydrovac truck, things like that. But then could taper off, to way less than 200 grand, not 100 to 200 grand. So that's the main thing we've been up to lately. And the next step is to figure out how we want to fund this. We put together, a really simple rate study that unfortunately just hit you today, so take some time to look at that. It's this.
Yes.
And it's, rather than a rate study, I would call it like the baseline, how we're gonna fund, everything. But if we go for co-funding or something like that, which we will, then these numbers change quite a bit. The utility needs to be set up so that you're actually like building a fund at first before you're spending. So we don't, maybe there's funds that can be set aside for stormwater that are not from your stormwater utility fund, but our thought was build up your fund for a couple of years, start your capital improvements in like 2026, 27, once you've got something in the reserve. So when Eric and I took the 4.5 million in capital improvements, 250 grand a year in annual maintenance, and if we just assume 5% interest every year and 3% growth in town every year, 5% I hope is conservative, and 3% growth is also conservative, based on your past 20 years, you're actually on like a 3.5% growth rate projection. We are seeing that you're gonna want 480 grand in revenue every year to fund your stormwater improvements and maintenance. And if we spread that out, we can play with the numbers. It's gonna be a little while before we come up with the final rate structure. But one thing that we see across these smaller Colorado communities is a separation of residential fees and non-residential fees. Non-residential just being everybody else. There doesn't need to be as much of a complex rate structure as water and sewer in town and out of town and meter sizing, because there is no meter. A lot of communities do an assessment based on an impervious area of your property, because that's where stormwater is coming from. But that is a really complex system to administer, and it needs to be assessed often. We have to have good GIS, good aerial imagery, which Clark County does, but it takes a lot of administration dealing with site surveys to measure impervious area of to get established the true impervious area. So what we're seeing in smaller communities that is easier to administer is flat fees. Flat fee for residential properties, flat fee for non-residential properties. And, like I said, we've got a long way to go before we decide what we're gonna consider a non-residential property and all those things, but per year for residential properties and $600 per year for non-residential properties. And I got the numbers of properties, residential, non-residential, from your water bill of 2023. And so the monthly breakdown of that for residential properties, $29-ish, and for non-residential properties, $50 monthly.
Catherine, that's considerably higher than your example cities, based on what I'm looking at here. And so is that based on the repairs that we have or the projects we have?
I think it's based on two things. This preliminary rate study doesn't take into account any co-funding, and I'm assuming
Ah.
these others have.
Yes.
There's some co-funding.
Okay.
And secondly, I think those communities are not charging maybe what they
Should be.
and we don't have to charge what we should be either. It's just, that's my theory, is that they set rates based on what they think the users can spend on. And that's how much improvements they're gonna do.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these are 4 years old, at least.
Mm-hmm. I did my own my own research for stormwater enterprise along the Front Range, and I think over the last 15 years, the Front Range has had some serious flooding, and they realized that they needed to address that. But, you know, what the climatologists are predicting is that for Southwest Colorado, we're going to have longer, drier spells, but when the rains do come, they're going to be pretty intense, just like it was in 2022, and caused damage to private property. And so I think it's a misnomer for people to go, well, it hardly rains in Southwest Colorado, but when it does rain, because our soil is so dry, it's just gonna run off, and it won't recharge our groundwater, which we may need in the next 10 years. Biocido might not be so good to us in the next 10 years, just because we're getting hotter and hotter. So, I think the necessity for a stormwater enterprise is really important, especially when I take a look at how many of, I mean, my goodness, it's like 41% of our culverts are undersized and not able to do the job. 52% of our storm drain pipe inventory is not able to do the job. Storm drain inlets, you know, half of those are not able to do the job. So we're way down. You know, I'm just going to call a number out that seems like it's pretty accurate, and it's about we're 50% in a tough spot, meaning that we don't have the infrastructure to address it when it does come. So, you know, right there, when you just do the math, you're like, yeah, we've got a problem. And thank goodness we've only had one major storm in quite a while, but it was enough to raise a ruckus. And, you know, at some point, you know, when's the town going to become liable for this? If we're not able to clean out our culverts, if we're not able to increase our culvert size, if we're not able to address our pipes, and then we've got the ditch companies, you know, all over us about what's happening, and that's a legitimate concern. We haven't done our job, so therefore it's affecting others, and you know, in both of these studies, both the water study and the stormwater study, you can just see the buildup of things that haven't been done. I have a client who owns several properties in Durango, and her husband refused to put money into those properties. And talk about your chicken coming to roost. All their roofs have had to been replaced. They've spent over $90,000 because they couldn't insure their properties. And if they would have done a little bit at a time, they wouldn't have been hit so hard. So it happens for all of us, and it happens for munis too, that if you don't address what's broken, it costs you way more money to make it right. So it's just, these are just the hard realities.
So where are our high priority areas?
Let's see, jump to.
It's table 11, isn't it, Catherine?
I've got a little list in the report itself for you. In no particular order.
Oh, I've got it. It's on page 11.
So are you familiar with Lupin Drive? We've got a culvert there that doesn't have curb inlets for whatever reason. So the culvert passes some water from A to B across the street, but actual Lupin Drive, the low spot just spills over the top of the curb.
Becomes the culvert.
And in general, spills into a one particular driveway as opposed to getting underground into the culvert. That whole situation is heightened by some piping of swales that really reduces capacity upstream. So the upstream property also floods. And we think that that whole issue will be actually improved when the Clover Meadows Phase 8 comes along, because they will be forced to do a detention pond. But, you know, you can't totally rely on that, so, I think that is the priority drainage project that we're trying to get done. We're trying to do something for inlets this year, actually, for that project. They've been designed and ordered and just waiting. Another, hairy intersection is Clover and Mustang. We've been seeing, sediment deposits at that intersection. Pooling. We think that part of the problem was that the Clover Meadows Phase 7 detention pond outlet structure wasn't quite right, but that's been lowered about a foot now, so we should be seeing less sediment in the streets. But it's still a really flat area that is probably gonna still see runoff from Clover just kind of sit on.
Is that pond big enough?
The pond is big enough, yes.
Just that intersection is kind of wonky, doesn't have a very good crown, so it has a tendency to lose water in there, it doesn't shed.
The intersection of Mustang and Mars is just west of that intersection, that Clover and Mustang, and it unfortunately just has a lot happening. We've got a ditch, we've got a swale, we've got cross culverts that are undersized, and then we've got a property that's lower than the road. And it's all just kind of a recipe for disaster, and one particular property seems to be taking the brunt of it. But, so there's some undersized piping over there that could easily help out. The Buck Highway drainage, system is pretty much all undersized. It's receiving a lot of subsurface drainage, not just surface water drainage. But it's a system that runs parallel to Buck Highway, basically from Gateway Parkway to, well, it goes past Mill Street, but that particular system, is all undersized for what we're seeing over there. Mill Street, West Mill Street, has some piping underneath, and it is all undersized. It is old, and flooding in those areas, and we think that that's largely from subsurface drainage, not necessarily bad drainage or undersized drainage infrastructure. But if we could give that subsurface somewhere to go, that could help out, but, they're kind of separate problems with the subsurface groundwater and foundation drain leaks that we're seeing, or I'm sorry, foundation leaks and private properties. Another big priority is the Mesa Park. That is along Mesa Avenue, kind of on the south side between Los Pinos and Mesa, where there used to be a pretty significant swale, carried a lot of water, and then piped at some point.
That was all they ditched for ever,
Right.
till the town developed the park, and then they put in the pipe.
We don't know who put in the pipe, because nobody knew it was there.
But it's an 8-inch pipe.
It's a.
Yeah.
It runs into the property directly to the south, and that's problematic. We saw quite a bit of flooding over there, in the June 22 storm, as well.
So it just created a lot more problems. So the 8-inch pipe needs to come out, it needs to be returned to the swale that actually has capacity.
Yeah, no, it was piped when they did the park,
When they did the playground.
yeah.
Yeah, so that was bad idea.
So we have kind of learned that Parks and Recreation was doing a lot of, I don't know what you call culverts. I forget what the last project I was like, Parks and Rec did what? So they may not even have had, I don't want to call it street smarts, but, basic street,
Stormwater
design and
smarts.
understanding of how it should have been.
Mhm.
So that would be my only guess, that we're finding that there was, prior to, Jeremy being on board, there was some things we're starting to discover. And the reason I'm starting to discover is going back to all the downtown, Colorado stuff that I found, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. Parks and Rec did this, and really, it's really a public works project, or should have been.
Well, we also learned that the park wasn't even dedicated to the town, so we would.
It wasn't, it didn't even.
Yeah,
that
no.
process in 2022.
Yeah,
This
no, I knew
park was
that,
owned.
yeah. How they ever got the grant for the park funding, I have no idea. 'Cause they asked me about it, and I told them that they didn't own it, and then they were like, well, we don't want to deal with that, so they just somehow got grant money without owning it.
Well, and a lot of that stuff came up, to be quite honest. There was probably some old water line pipe that they had. Town wanted to address parking to be able to access Mesa Park for the handicap equipment. So what they did is they got the pipe, they got a backhoe, they went down there, they put a drain in it, and they addressed the parking. And then they went like this. And nobody cared until 2022.
Yep.
And now we had a storm event, and we're like, oh, that pipe's too small. Well, of course it was. Because we just had Parks at Rec, they'll bury it, and now you can park your car. So that's what we're seeing a lot when we're going through the study, is some of that stuff that had been put in, at a lower cost, which was important. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's budgetary constraints and everything else, so at that point in time, it was put in at a lower cost with materials that were readily available, and so that's where we're seeing some of these bottlenecks that are coming out. I don't think it's bad or good, it's just where we're at, so we're trying to meet this where
Right.
we're at right now.
Yeah, no, that was all the ditch, all the way down through, and actually that ditch is the same one that runs all the way down to, Mars and, where are we at? I forget the name of the road, Mars and Mustang. And that's what's causing all the flooding down there too. And it used, the people that used to live next to me have told me that before the town put in that one little concrete culvert there, like on Los Pinos, that their house used to flood out all the time. And then they put in that 24-inch pipe to get it all down there, and now it's flooding down. I mean, I don't know how long it's been flooding downstream. I mean, until that last storm, like, I never even heard of it getting bad down there before. Other than the, normal stuff, but their house didn't flood this time.
That's what we see too, is, when the town
a good point that, you know, it's not something that we can just, like, oh, this was identified, as needing a 24-inch, let's just go do that tomorrow. Like, it all has to be thought through,
Mhm.
and so if we're gonna replace this pipe, we have to be ready for it downstream.
Mhm.
It's not as simple as, you know, just doing one a year as we go. It's gotta be a plan, it's gotta be thought through.
Right.
And then, Dove Ranch, that was my finale of non-managed areas. I think you guys are familiar with Dove Ranch and its lack of stormwater management and, yeah, what we've inherited.
So every one of these, every once in a while, when it starts, it clouds up, I get a phone call from a couple of them. Or Nicole gets a phone call, or Jeremy gets a phone call, because they, you know, what are you gonna do about it? So, you know, and the thing is, after that last storm, they're aware it's gonna happen.
Mhm.
It's not, you know, and it's just a matter of, like you said, we cure one person's issue here, and before we know it, we're creating another problem somewhere else. And, when they adopted, or when they had the street sales tax passed, it provided some stormwater fees for, you know, like culverts. But you're gonna have to decide, either you're gonna do streets or stormwater. You
Mhm.
can't do both. But basically, the stormwater was only incidental on, you know, street construction and things like that, not necessarily to cover the whole cost. And the street fund, is a government fund. It is not, doesn't operate like a business. So that's why you really want a separate stormwater,
Mhm.
fund that's a enterprise and operate like a business. Its business is taking in revenue to pay for the infrastructure to continue to take care of stormwater.
How come off subject, I guess, but how come the street fund isn't an enterprise fund?
It's because it's collecting sales tax.
Oh, okay.
And it's collecting HUTF tax, and you shouldn't do, it's Tabor, based on Tabor, and it's more complicated than that, but based on Tabor, you shouldn't do that. You're gonna get yourself in trouble.
So
Okay.
it doesn't necessarily have a dedicated revenue stream. It's operated and funded by a tax.
By taxes.
As opposed to a water fee or,
Water to sewer rate
Right.
or rate?
for the revenue stream.
Okay.
So we're at a, you know, a good pause point here where we've, you know, confirmed what we are seeing in the stormwater model is the problem drainage areas. We've confirmed with town staff. And so now we've got some baseline numbers to start working with
Mhm.
and starting to move forward. And so my question for the town is, how complicated do you want to get with your rate structure? There's a lot of different directions to go, and I don't even answer it today.
Mhm.
But I want you to think about, you know, what you're willing to put, the brain damage that you're willing to put on the staff to do an impervious surface area-based rate, which is a more fair rate structure, because it's not necessarily fair that the huge, you know, outfit that takes up, you know, 100 acres of the, you know, impervious parking lot. I don't think we have very many of those in town, but.
Well, the thing is, you have churches that we have one church that's not even active. So, you know, the thing is you're charging a church, so it's easier to have a base rate, versus, you know, starting to measure the square footage of a church maybe that's not used all that much, and before you know it, it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Yeah, it's not something I recommend, but it, like you said, that church technically has more impervious surface, huge roof, huge parking lot,
Yep.
and it's contributing more stormwater than the little, you know, sliver-sized parcel of business that's actually paying for
So what's the margin of error? So you had said that the cost structure per project, you know, is pretty much an estimate. So if we were to take the summary of projected storm water expenditures, run up that cost per year, and then figure out how to pay for it every year, what's the margin of error there between what you believe is a good number for us to set rates for
Well, you
our
always hope
community?
the engineer's a high bidder.
Mm-hmm,
So our cost per unit of linear footage of pipe, for example,
mm-hmm,
was derived from an inventory of SGM drainage projects, including several in Beekfield, and CDOT.
mm-hmm,
And we didn't take, like CDOT's per linear foot of pipe.
mm-hmm,
CDOT projects break everything down really small. We added, everything, backfill,
mm-hmm,
pipe connections, traffic control. We've taken a lot of these things into account. So that's why you're seeing a really high
mm-hmm,
price, like $340 per foot.
mm-hmm.
Because it covers a lot of those other construction costs. So we feel like we've been really conservative with our estimate,
Mm-hmm.
but that number is a 2024 number.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
it needs to be increased.
So if we were, just as an example, to work off your 482K, and, you know, start charging $29.17 per month, $29.17 per month to put towards this stormwater utility, so we could build up that money to start on these projects. The truth of the matter is we may start collecting money, start putting that into a fund, and 5 years from now go, oh, the 2917 didn't come close. So I kind of don't like that very much. I just feel like I'd rather have a number that wouldn't cause us to have to increase. Because I think once we set this stormwater fund amount, I'd like to see it stick for a while. And I know that's tough. I hear what you're saying. We can't anticipate costs, future costs, but I don't know. I trust that your numbers are as close as you could get them. But the fact that you have that caveat that says, that's our estimated numbers for today. And I'd like to think that you've captured as much as you can in each one of these projects that are gonna be costs. But if you've ever built a home, the minute you start to build the home, it's like, here's your builder's cost, and then the next thing you know, you've got to find another 10 grand out of pocket or whatever. So the best I can do is trust that you guys did your due diligence with this and came within a reasonable number. You did mention in your report that there were what I'll call inexpensive cleanup costs that we could address initially. And it might be cleaning out culverts and dealing with some pipes but these are lower costs compared to these gigantic projects. Do we, Katie, have money for that right now?
Well, you talk about cleanup, so I think this is just my experience, is that if you go ahead and just go ahead and take care of it,
Mm-hmm.
take care of it out of some other fund, the public's gonna come back and say, well, why are you charging me a stormwater fee when you could take care of it? Why don't you just keep taking care of it? So the issue is with whether you have sunrise retention that needs this construction cost, what do you not hit?
Mm-hmm.
If you decide that we're only gonna spend $10,000, and we'll just do whatever we can with $10,000, kind of like we do with chip seal and
Mhm.
everything else, well, then we'll spend $10,000, but there's a kind of a point where you have to determine if you're gonna keep doing that,
Mhm.
because the neighbor in, on, Mississippi versus the neighbor on North Mountain, they say, wait a minute, you took care of their problem, but not my problem that I'm
Mhm.
having.
Mhm.
So, you know, the case is now are we gonna, and now I'm paying a utility fee, and here you could do it before out of your other funds. And if that's what you decide to do, to take it out of a government fund,
Mhm.
we were hoping, we took the feasibility study out of the government fund with the goal that if we went ahead with the enterprise and got grants and loans, then we would pay, then we would get that money back. And USDA said that is, we could get reimbursed for that after we got the fund going.
Mhm.
But if you just keep doing it,
Mhm.
and this stuff never got done.
Yeah.
So 10 years ago, we had this plan, and we had to wait until we lost a road
Mhm.
to actually do something about something.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's where you wanna go.
No, I was just wondering because it was mentioned in the report that these were inexpensive comparatively costs, so I was just curious about
All
that.
I can say is if you throw out a number, it's 10,000 or 50,000
Yeah.
or 5,000, we'll see how far it goes.
Yeah. Well, when I look at, so the budgetary cost for the pond improvements is roughly 76K. But we don't own all those ponds, or these are the ponds we
That's
own.
correct. We don't own three.
We own 3. And so this 76K is for our 3 ponds? All the ponds? Okay. Curious, did you, I think all of this is what I'll call hardscape, and I know that's not the right terminology, but if we were to use green infrastructure to address these ponds, could it be considerably less?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, like maybe replacing a pond with a fire retention facility that, you know, adds landscaping, still does its job
Mhm.
of draining. I don't think it would be considerably less to convert a detention, to convert a detention facility into a rain garden or a fire retention facility. That would be to just dredge the pond.
Mhm. Well, I have a case study from Fort Collins, which is a canal importation ponds and outfill. And it actually took care of 175 homes that were being impacted by the floodplain. It reduced flooding, improved water quality, improved local street drainage, and improved wildlife habitat and public access. So I'm all about saving money. So if there was a green way to approach these things, how would we add that at some point?
Can you describe that a little bit more? I could, the audio is a little murky for me to hear.
Sure. I was asking if there was a way to address the ponds through a green landscape approach, which is more or less green infrastructure. And so I said Fort Collins had a case study where they utilized funds to create a canal importation for the ponds and outfall, and it removed flood risks to 175 homes, reduced flooding, improved water quality, improved local street drainage, and improved wildlife habitat and public access, along with recharging the groundwater. And they were able to put this in through bioretention facility, bioswale, green roof, and curb cuts to affect that. So I'm wondering.
It's the smorgasbord of low-impact development techniques, or, yeah. Well, I mean, it's certainly possible. I'd have to see the plans or the study that was done for Fort Collins and see how they implemented it. A lot of bioswale solutions require land, obviously, to infiltrate water. And in developed subdivisions where there's not many open spaces or common areas, that's problematic because you're gonna have to work with landowners to, share the space in their yard potentially and the right of way to put bioswales in. It would be definitely something to consider for future drainage code though, to start implementing those features now for all new development, where that could easily be integrated without a lot of strife with landowners. We don't have a lot of open space opportunities to centralize it, but we could look into it further. I mean, it certainly could be an aspect of the project if people like this to explore it further.
Well, I was thinking about the current ponds that are requiring some maintenance or changes or additions.
Well, essentially they are bioswales in their own right because they do discharge some portion of their stormwater accumulation into the ground. So they do act as a bioswale, probably more so now because they're not as well maintained and the outlet structures don't relieve them as quickly. So in a sense, they're kind of acting, oddly enough, more like bioswales than actually detention ponds in their current status of maintenance. But again, it's the volume of water and the available land, because you guys generally sit on clay soils.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not familiar with Fort Collins' soils. I bet they might be more granular sandy soils there because of the composition of the geology of the Front Range versus our geology.
Mm-hmm.
So they probably have very effective infiltration rates also in their swales, and that could explain how their success level with reducing groundwater. We have mostly clay well, I won't get into the details, but you basically have predominantly clay soils except in pockets along the river, and just west of downtown there's some quite sandier soils there, which are river deposit soils. So clay soils just don't take as much water, number one. But disconnected impervious cover is a technique. Limiting sidewalks and driveways is always a great way. People hate this, but reducing street widths so you have less impervious cover, and narrowing the streets to calm them down are always good planning techniques. Nicole can probably speak to that as well. And that helps reduce the amount of hardscape that creates runoff or more runoff. So there's a lot of things we can look at in the development code and the drainage code to move forward with those ideas easily, but there's not a lot I can feel we can do at this point with the existing stuff out there other than maintain it well, and without a bigger investment in cash too right now, which we're already looking at a sizable number here. So I don't think there's a lot we can do, but if you can send me the link to that study, I'd happy to take a look at it and delve into it more and answer your question more fully in the future.
Sure.
Next week sometime.
It was just a question, looking at how we can cut cost of, the overall project improvements that we need to do, and I was just curious if that was an option, and we could consider that.
Yeah, I think most of ours are one-for-one replacements. Along Buck Highway on the east side where all that hillside moisture comes in, that might be a place that we could look at some bioswales there as well. Actually, that pipe could use some sub-drainage eventually too, because there's so much groundwater moving through there. But there's some possibilities where we have a little more right-of-way to do that kind of thing, and we could explore that there.
Great. So what of these projects right now are costing the town on a fairly regular basis? Like, are the biggest impacts right now to the towns?
What do you mean costing?
Well, there's challenges with these projects currently, we know that. So are we doing any kind of maintenance or repairs on any of these projects right now just to clean up what needs to be repaired? Does that make sense?
We're doing it based on to save the street, but not
Yeah.
to manage the stormwater.
Yeah. Is there any one of these projects that costs you more than the others right now?
Like the lack of maintenance of it?
Yes.
costing us
Yep.
to go out and
Yeah.
do it?
Because these projects are probably costing us something right now,
Well,
right?
the personal property loss
Yeah.
is costing somebody, it's
Yeah.
not us.
Yeah.
And so we go,
Well, I'm referring more to town repairs that might be going on any of these projects currently.
We've cleaned culverts, we've got the sewer truck out, which isn't necessarily what it's designed for, but will work to clean the pipe. So we've had that in there. Make sure that we've alleviated obstructions from some of the culverts, some of the red lines you see on some of those maps we've been in over in Mesa and back and forth. And we currently are going to complete the lupine storm inlets.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to make a road repair there.
Mm-hmm.
So we're basically cutting open the roadway, we're adding some piping, and we're going to allow road access to that drainage pipe that's in there.
Mhm.
And that's going to be a large improvement for that area.
Mm-hmm.
But technically, that's a street project.
Yes.
So like Katie was saying before, we're making a road improvement with our restricted street funds.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna help alleviate some of the stormwater problems that we've seen there, which we have those funds that are earmarked for it.
Mhm.
We don't necessarily have any funding for the off-street stormwater improvements,
Mhm.
other than just maintenance. We clean storm racks, we have a hydrovac truck, so we're able to clean some of the inlets, remove some of the debris. And so we've
Mhm.
done that type of maintenance that we can do in-house,
Mhm.
which is basically costing you labor, man-hours,
Mhm.
out of there, and not necessarily these material costs that you're seeing in the report.
Right.
So, that's kind of as far as we've been able to get
Mm-hmm.
to this point, until we identify funding sources for maybe some of these other projects you see.
Because managing stormwater saves streets.
Yes, of course,
If
yeah.
you don't manage stormwater, then you're gonna have, deterioration of streets
Yeah.
beyond, so that's what we're spending it on,
Mhm.
but not just to take care of the list that you see on number 11.
Right,
Because
right.
there's not funding for it.
Correct.
Well,
Oh.
one that might come back,
Go ahead.
cost us a lot in the future is Dove Ranch.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
If we don't take care of that sooner than later,
yeah.
then it becomes a big issue.
Well, and part of my questioning about that was, I know, like with Dove Ranch, I believe Dove Ranch is having the impact on the ditch.
Well, it's water quality, the
Yep.
Clean Water Act,
Uh-huh.
requires that stormwater should not go into irrigation
Mhm.
ditches.
Mhm.
It's our responsibility to take care of that.
Mhm.
Now, before that act, water ran into ditches, and that's the way we handle it. So we have a lot of the old part of town, and this isn't the only town that, that was just the way they handled it. Well, that's not the way you're supposed to handle it anymore. And that act is quite a few years old, so
Mhm.
it's gonna take us a while to catch up.
Yeah. Well, and I understand. I mean, I did a ton of research on Dove Ranch because I live there. And just the town kind of let that developer walk away and not do the right job and finish the job that was in the subdivision development agreement. And now it's our problem, and it shouldn't have ever happened. And I believe that it's affecting 501 because it's eroding underneath. And I was understanding that on the other side of 501, it's going into people's property down there. So when we have rains, because we don't have a proper retention pond, it goes underneath the 501, and then it's eroding the 501, and then it also is creating water issues for the person who lives on the west side of
The
501.
west side and the east side.
And the east side.
There's property damage there too.
Mhm. For those houses at the
Yeah.
bottom, yeah, exactly. I think what I'm concerned about, and I'm not saying, I get this. I get that this report was to determine what projects needed to be done, what the cost was gonna be, and then how we could set up a stormwater fund. I get all that. And roughly what we're looking at for fees to do that. All that makes perfect sense to me. I think my concern is, you had said that it would be, that we probably wouldn't have enough money to begin. We'd have to build up this fund to begin. And in the meantime, we've got these projects that are sitting out there causing us problems. So, if we could, I think what I'm thinking is, again, how do we notify the citizens? How do we bring this news to them? But I think if we could say, hey, here's our list of projects, here's what we can address 2 years from now. Here's what we can address 5 years from now. As long as we could give them a schedule of why we need this money. But I'm concerned that, is the town liable at all if we didn't do our job with the retention pond on Dove Ranch, using that as an example, that the county's gonna be like, hey, we're gonna sue you for money to fix 501, or,
The Schroeder ditch can
Mhm.
sue each individual homeowner.
mhm,
That's who's liable.
okay,
The town is not liable.
Okay.
They sue each individual homeowner.
Got it.
So guess what the Schroeder ditch says?
mhm,
I don't think so. I don't think we're gonna get in there, so they're gonna go to the bigger brother,
mhm,
the town.
mhm,
And so that's, and I understand that it comes back to the town, but then the citizens are gonna have to pay for that.
correct, yes,
And
I
the
understand,
citizens- Now, you can look at Dove Ranch, but then you can look at all the other failing
absolutely,
ponds and issues across town. Everybody's gonna chip in and pay their fair share to take care of that.
mhm,
When you talk about waiting, you don't necessarily have to wait. There's other strategies that you can do to say, hey, you adopt a fee, January 1st of 2025, and you start on projects, you got engineering, you got a feasibility study.
right,
Now you start on engineering basically to get ready to do some of these smaller things
mhm,
in 2025. Yeah, you're not gonna do a Dove Ranch retention
mhm,
pond,
mhm,
but then by that time, so when your funders are looking at you, even for a loan process, they're gonna say, is there skin in the game?
mhm,
Are you collecting fees to take care of yourself, not just asking the feds or the state
mhm,
to pony up what we should have been doing ourselves?
mhm.
So that's what you actually have to have in place, and by that time, you have a platform to say, we're more prepared, we have a feasibility study, we're gonna start engineering,
Mhm.
we have, we're collecting rates, and now we're gonna start doing some of these smaller projects, could be, the end of 2024,
Mhm.
and then we start working at it. Now, some of the people that are losing personal property,
Mhm.
they probably want something a little sooner, so I don't think it's just a matter of just waiting till 2027 to assist. There's it's our moral responsibility to do something.
Absolutely,
And if we don't have any money to do it, then it becomes, something that we just can't do.
yeah. Well, I always know if you're spending money, you'd like to see what you're spending your money on. So if you can see that projects are in place. I think I was concerned, that Catherine pointed out that we might have to build up a fund, for a period of time. So if
The
we,
engineer,
yeah,
your manager.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
sometimes they're gonna tell you that there's gonna be a strategy
yes,
to make sure, but you still have to have something in place that we can strategize off of.
sure, absolutely, I understand that.
I'm not saying she's a great engineer.
No, I gotcha, I gotcha.
You're totally right, we didn't get a chance to talk about that.
Yeah.
Like, there could be money out there that I don't know about.
Uh-huh.
That's just how I consider this particular rate stuff.
Well, and a fund, like a enterprise fund, can take out a loan.
That's correct.
So
Mm.
there's other options if you need to do something.
The sewer fund borrowed, $500,000 from the general fund.
Mm-hmm,
Those are areas, and then you have to pay it back. You can't
yes,
just say, oh, that's a great idea.
mm-hmm,
So the thing is to decommission the sewer lagoons, they borrow money from the general fund. So there's a strategy in this all. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be, way out there. And then you get to decide, you can look at this list, or
Mhm.
you get to decide what you feel is a priority.
Mhm.
The citizens that have been impacted are gonna be in here too.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's a given, I understand. Well, based on the fact that we are 50% behind with the infrastructure, with everything related to stormwater, again, the evidence is there. So I don't think it's debatable necessarily whether we should or shouldn't do this. I think it's a very clear statement that we've got major issues and we need to address them. And the sooner we can get addressing these, the better off we're going to be. So Katie, if we were to agree to work off SGM's numbers and put together this storm utility, what's your timing on that? What's your thoughts?
Facilities your enterprise is already created.
Oh, that's
It was
right,
created
that's
years
right.
ago.
Yep. No, that's right.
You just don't have any money going in.
Right,
Yeah, we just need to fund it at
Yeah.
this point. and decide how much we're gonna fund it and where it's coming from.
And I would actually advise you that at some point, whether it's August 1st or September 1st, is you just start out with a small fee
Mm-hmm.
so that it starts to show up in utility bills, so that people will get accustomed to something and understand, you know, I know that you wanna get stuff out to the citizens.
Yes.
But the day they get their bill and it goes from $120 to $135,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say, that's when they're gonna start asking.
Right.
And so, it's unfortunate, and what, we actually had our, last leadership, committee, or, training yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And it was highly suggested we put together like a little pamphlet that you can take to the ice cream, social, so that you can hand out, and if there's more questions that people have,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that at least you have kind of some talking points. It's not gonna give you everything. 'cause,
Right.
You know, I give you a book and nobody's gonna read it,
Right.
but at least give you talking points to start out with, and that's what's gonna be on there, about rates.
Yeah. Well, I know we need a fee. What would you, so are you comfortable with the 2917? If you say start out with a small fee, what's your
I
thoughts?
would prefer, $10,
Yeah,
just to say, I don't care if it's August 1st or September 1st, I would start with something.
mm-hmm,
And then by that time, we have a better rate understanding, and I can talk to USD and say, oh, by the way, we're collecting rates now, we're collecting something. We
Yeah.
have something in place,
to operate.
that I have a talking point. Right now, I can just say, are you gonna give us money or a grant? And they're gonna go, well, what have you done to help yourself? And, yeah, I can talk to them till I'm blue in the face, but I do know that it takes a little bit of coming with them, like, okay, we're starting to help ourselves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, if we were to round up for that 2917 and charge $15 for the rate, that cuts what we can put into a fund by half, let's say. So it takes us from 482K to 241K. I think that $15 amount might be more appropriate, because it sets a better accomplishment goal towards trying to get up towards that 482.
It's cold.
It's cold coffee.
It's ice coffee.
It's, so I think something more like 15 might be a good idea, just because I'm doing the math with that. And if I were to take that $30 per month and divide that in half, that gives us roughly 240K a month, or 240K a year to go into the stormwater
So,
enterprise.
You can start with any amount you wanted,
Yeah.
but I think what I would start out with is a little bit lower,
Mhm.
and give us a chance to take a look for other grant funding.
Aha, okay,
And that at least says something, that we're gonna charge you an extra $10,
mhm,
but we're trying to do something. If not, it may be $29.
mhm,
And, you know, that's a good talking point to at least get that understood. We're collecting just enough to start engineering, to start doing some, you know, getting ready for those projects.
yeah. I like that idea. That makes good sense to me. I think being able to get grant money or funding from anywhere right now, it's kind of like, you know, you're either gonna cut bait or you're gonna catch fish. And if you're not catching fish, then you're losing opportunities, and that infrastructure money's not gonna last for a real long time. So I think we should jump on any opportunity that we can. So I like that. That works for me. I think that's smart.
Do we have some other questions on stormwater?
No.
I'd like to open this up for general public input on any of the agenda items that we brought up.
I don't hear it.
I was just going to talk a little bit about the drainage, and I know the issues that we had.
Name and address.
Rick Ludwig, 9002, County Road 521. We're just south of the Clover Meadow subdivision that's being built, or Mustang Crossing, excuse me. I'm a ditch rider for the Schroeder and the Bean Ditch both, as well as a board member for the Schroeder and the Campbell Lateral. During the big storms that we did have, that you were talking about, we actually did have a ditch that washed over the top of the bank, washed out a county road. That would have been County Road, what, 525? It's over here. 526. It did wash it out. That day that we had that storm, just from the stormwater drainage that we was picking up in the Schroeder ditch, I had to take almost 25 CFS of water out of that out of that ditch, excuse me, in order to hold that water in the ditch bank. It was a major storm event. I understand that, but the stormwater drainage that we've got coming in our ditches, we really need to address doing something with that. As far as on the information that I have gathered, being in the water critical area that we are in, the stormwater drainage water has got to go back to the river. The ditches that this water is picking up is not returning back to the river any way, shape, or form. It's all going plumb out to Spring Creek. It falls into the Pentecost ditch. I mean, it never makes its way back to the river. And that's where, talking to the Warren Gabbert, the water commissioner, that's what he's told me. He said water critical areas, that stormwater has got to make its way back to the river. And that's kind of where we're at with all the stormwater drainage right now that we've got going on. Ponds wise, oh, that's a different, I'll get into that different. Anybody, you want to say anything? No, you're good? That's just one of my concerns that I have that I wanted to address.
Thank you for that information.
Catherine, I did want to say thank you. And I didn't know if you had anything else to add.
No, just that this is a draft, and so keep sending us comments. We've got to refine our rates a little bit, talk to town staff a little bit more about prioritizing projects. And our thought was to kind of set you guys up with some recommended next steps. You know, we don't specialize in making flyers for the public. But we can gather examples and, you know, browse, you know, other Colorado communities and how they, who we think is doing a good job with talking about their stormwater utility versus who we don't think is doing a good job of talking about it. Just try to set you guys up for the next steps. We've got staff here who do know how to make flyers for getting that information across. So we don't think that you need to hire another consultant for this big PR campaign. Which is something I would normally recommend.
Yeah.
Something like this, but I actually think town staff might be better than you guys.
I just know that people, if people understand why we're doing it, that they have a clear picture, you know, and if you just explain the volatile areas that we have, how our infrastructure is way below standard. I mean, 50% is a lot. If we were 15% below standard, that'd be one thing, but we're 50% below standard, and that's huge. And I'm all about preventative maintenance. So if we can set ourselves up to minimize and mitigate impacts, especially to our citizens, because they're paying out of pocket to repair these flood damages issues. And when we had a lot of people that came and were pretty pissed off and wanted to know who was going to pay for what, and I empathize with them. You know, it's not right that our town doesn't have the right infrastructure to at least assure them that. We can't do everything, but if we can minimize it, that's a huge deal. So, and if you could possibly look at green infrastructure for ponds, if it's cheaper. I'm all about saving the town money too. I realize we're going to be spending a lot of money, but it's, again, I don't see any way out of it. I just don't. And I don't think that book over there, that 3-ring binder is embarrassing. That's embarrassing. So, yeah, that's all I have to say.
So we have some June events and meetings coming up. It's on the agenda if you want to take a look at those. Hopefully we'll get some other trustees in there, and then,
So I will have, be up there Monday, a little before 6:30 and hand out flyers. I'm not gonna stay, it's a trustee party.
Sure.
So just so you have those.
Yeah.
And, see how it works for you the next day.
Great.
So we have our meeting.
we'll give you input on Tuesday.
Yes. Thank you.
So I was joking. So we'll see you all on Tuesday night.
Yep.
Meeting adjourned.
Monday.
Huh? Well, Monday at the social, but